Hello and welcome to Harris County Public Library's monthly HCPL Writes program. I'm Amy Campbell, the branch manager at the Catherine Tyrett Bear Creek Library and also an author. Today, I'll have the pleasure of chatting with guest authors as we discuss genre-bending books. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them as they come in. Now, before we get into our Q&A with today's guest authors about how to write genre-bending books, let's talk a little bit about what genre bending is, because a lot of people don't know. All right, let's go to the next slide. So genre bending is when a book or movie doesn't fit neatly into a single category. Or it can also mean when you take a classic subject and set it in a totally different setting. For example, a lot of fairy tale retellings fall into this category. All right, next slide. So this slide shows some popular examples of genre-bending books. Some of them are so well known that readers may not have even realized that they were reading something unusual. And there's also lots of popular movies that do this too. For example, the classic favorite Groundhog Day blends fantasy, rom-com, and drama. Being John Malkovich is a blend of comedy, drama, and fantasy. From Dusk Till Dawn is a blend of horror, comedy, crime, and action. And I won't give you any spoilers, but Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness has added horror aspects to the normal Marvel superhero action, adventure, comedy stylings. All right, next slide, please. So writers can learn a lot from genre bending. So some things to keep in mind if you do choose to explore this type of writing is it opens up a world of creativity, and it gives you a lot more freedom to write than you may have even realized. You'll also discover, and this is the really cool part for us genre bending authors, that there really is a reader for every book. No matter how strange the thing is you write, there is a reader out there for it. And it also lets you embrace and explore the unusual, which is a lot of fun. So if you want to do something different, don't let that stop you, because you can add it. You can have dragon solving mysteries. That is totally cool. And I would actually probably like to read about that, or maybe write that. All right. So next slide, please. But as with anything in this world, there are some potential downsides. So when you don't fit neatly into one genre, it's a heck of a lot harder to market your book. Since you may fit into such a wide array of categories, it can be kind of confusing to your reader. It's also a lot more difficult to find other authors and books that can be used as read-alikes for yours. That's a particular problem I have. It can make, if you're running ads, it can make it harder to target those ads because you have so many separate things that you could target. It makes it confusing. And also, a lot of times readers love to read more of the same. So when you're pulling a Rocket Raccoon, Ain't No Thing Like Me Except Me, you have to work a lot harder to get your readers because there's nothing else like yours that they can read at that time. So maybe you need to write more of it. It can also prove difficult to find the right keywords to target for your search engine optimization, or if you're running ads. So that's something else to keep in mind. You have to get really creative with your keywords, which I'm still trying to figure out. But don't let these negative things scare you off. Genre bending is a lot of fun, and it can be very worthwhile. All right, so now we're going to meet the authors on today's panel. I am happy to say I'm joined by Art Horton, who some of you may remember from last month's write-in, as well as Bree Tart and author J.R. Frontera. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
All right, well, I'm so happy to be joined by all of you. So first, we'll give you a chance to let the audience know more about you and the books that you write. So, Art, if you would tell us more about your books and your writing, we'd love to hear from you.
Right. I am a fantasy writer primarily. I kind of think of myself as a speculative fiction writer because of genre bending. But I have a trilogy out now called the Televerin Trilogy. It starts with a book called Struggling with the Current. And I'm releasing a new series starter next month called Heroes and Harbingers, which is also fantasy. The trilogy is more of an epic hero journey fantasy. This one is what I'm calling adult fantasy academia, meaning it's about magic schools, but it's also about the adults at the magic schools, not the kids. So that's my stuff.
Awesome. Well, I know I'm excited for when your book comes out next month, so I can't wait to get my copy. All right. So next, Bree, tell us more about your books and your writing.
Hi, I'm Bree Tart. I write my genre mashup of choice is, I guess you'd call it mythological fantasy. It's fae fantasy, but it draws a lot more from classic folklore and myths. My main trilogy or not trilogy, it's a 5-book series, working on book 4 at the moment, but it's Exiles of Ire, or Ira. I always get the pronunciation wrong because a lot of it is based in old Irish mythology. It starts with the first book, Iron and Ivy. I have another series out right now that is more adult focused. I guess you'd call it urban fantasy, called Heart of Hellfire. And I've been bouncing between those, but I've got ideas in the future of something more epic leaning, but hey, we'll see.
Awesome. That sounds fun too. And it looks like Ark's going to be really interested in some of your books there. I know that she likes the type of mythology you're talking about.
I do.
We'll need to talk then.
Yeah.
All right, Jenny, please tell us about you and your books.
Yeah. Yes, I write as JR Frontera, but please just call me Jenny. You don't have to call me JR. So that's why I have both my names, so that nobody has to wonder what the heck to call me. But I write mostly science fiction and fantasy flavored things, although I think pretty much all of the books I've written so far are a lovely genre mashup. So that's why I was so excited to hear about this talk going on tonight. So I think this will be really fun. But let's see. So far, I have a comedic space opera trilogy that is complete. And then I have my current series is like a weird Western. It's a blend of science fiction and Western, and probably a lot of other things too, actually. But primarily, I just call it a sci-fi Western. So those are my 2 main projects. But yeah, there's definitely, I have 2 more series that are pretty solidly planned out, even already right now. And they are also both blends of genres. So that's clearly what I like to do.
Awesome. And I also want to let our viewers know that if you are local to Harris County, you can find books by all of these authors in Libby and Overdrive. So if any of the things you're hearing about pique your interest, go take a look at our catalog there. And there's lots of cool stuff you can download. And I'll go ahead and give my intro as well for what I write for my author part of this gig. Many of our viewers may know me, but for those who don't, I am a fantasy writer, but I can't be normal, so I write what I call Western fantasy, which I do think differs from Weird Western because Weird Western does have more like sci-fi and sometimes horror aspects to it. And I focus more on the magical part of it with some LGBTQ plus representation and other wackiness thrown in. So yeah, that's what I've been writing, and I've really been enjoying it. All right, so now we're going to get into the nitty gritty and the questions that I know were head scratchers for some of our panel. And Taylor, if you want to take that slide, you can put more of us on screen. Will it Taylor rearrange us?
Like the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, she'll rearrange us eventually, I'm sure. All right, so first question, we're going to talk about things other than our own books. What's your favorite genre bending book or movie? And we'll hear from Ark first.
Okay, so I know you're saying singular, but hold on. First of all, I had an answer for this chosen, and then you actually showed my very favorite book. American Gods is my very favorite book. I read it so many times. I've actually been to House on the Rock because I was inspired by this book. Because like Brie, I am a huge fan of mythology and mixing it into stories. But I really wanted to give a shout out to this series because a lot of people haven't heard about it, and it's so good. It's called the DFC series. It's by Rachel Aaron. It starts with a book called Minimum Wage Magic, and it is fantastic at combining science fiction with fantasy because you've got all this crazy fantasy stuff, like really well researched fantasy stuff. but also has all this futuristic technology, and it takes place in a futuristic Detroit. It's so good. It's so good.
That sounds fun. I know I've read her, I can't remember the name, but the book about the dragon who got made into a human. Yeah, that was a fun one too.
This is a companion
Yeah,
series
I'll have
to
to check
that.
that out. All right, so Bree, what's your favorite genre-bending book or movie?
Well, the whole singular challenge thing. So favorite genre bending book series is The Parasol Protectorate by Gail Carriger. If you've ever read that, it is paranormal, steampunk, Victorian, comedy of manners, even some sci-fi in there, like alternate history kind of thing. Favorite book is singular book is The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. That one seems like it's a conventional fantasy, but spoilers, it is ridiculously bittersweet. It has all kinds of lighthearted fairy tale things, but it turns them on their head. Wizard who's bad at magic, maiden who gets met after she's not a maiden anymore. Unicorn is the main character of the story, who is just this emotionless thing, and it's beautiful, and yeah, I'd recommend it. Last favorite webtoon is Lore Olympus at the moment. And I love how it mixes contemporary romance, contemporary YA, I guess, and Greek mythology, like classic, well-researched Greek mythology with a beautiful art style. Just got published, so it's technically also a graphic novel.
Awesome. Well, Jenny, how about you?
You guys named some good ones that I didn't even think about. In particular, The Last Unicorn, and yeah. I didn't read American Gods, but I started the show, which we're not all the way through. However, even though I'm confused a lot, also I can't really stop watching it. So it's very intriguing. I feel like I keep just if I just keep watching, I'm sure I'll start getting it. So I think I've got a handle on it pretty much. I think, but that was another good one that you mentioned. But for my very favorite show or movie, I'm gonna have to I feel like this is cheating, but I mean Firefly. So immediately the first one I think of, I'm like, oh, Firefly. So that's probably my all-time favorite show. Yeah, movies are harder, I feel like, but I'm a huge fan of comedy in whatever I'm watching. So the Marvel universe was a good example, because Guardians are my favorite Avengers 1000%. So I just love them to death. So that's probably one of my very, very favorite movies. But yeah, that's probably all I have. I feel like Firefly is such a cheat, but it's just such a great example.
It is. And I have that very same Groot shirt, and on my shelf behind me among my horses, I also have some of the pops of them. So I've got a little Christmas Groot and stuff like that. I love the Guardians too. Well, for me, so I had to think about that long and hard. But so the thing I'm fixating on now that's kind of genre bending is, and I know Ark's going to know about this, maybe I'll do too, but Our Flag Means Death on HBO Max. So for those who don't know, it seems like it's just a historical thing, but it's a historical pirate drama comedy. And it really is loosely based on the gentleman pirate and his history. Because actually, when I started watching it, I was like, okay, are they actually following some of the history? And they actually are, which is really cool. So I've just been okay, wow, this is very inspiring and really cool how they did it. And of course, Taika Waititi is in it and directing it, so that's going to be awesome. And he plays Blackbeard too. So I like what they did in the Thor movies too. So he definitely likes to blend comedy and drama and all kinds of things like that. So I'm really enjoying that. And that's kind of inspiring my writing. So when I can actually have time to write again, that's definitely going to have aspects of it. I'm I just watched the whole first season, and I'm like rewatching it again to like pick up things from it. That's how much I've been enjoying it.
Nice.
And it also looks like in our comments, like Manda Garrison also enjoys the Parasol Protectorate, which I also really enjoyed. So yay!
That was it. Yes, that was the other one I was trying to think of that you had mentioned. Yes, that is. I love that one as well. That is true. That's the other one. I was like, what is the other one she mentioned? That was
It's
it.
the whole Parasol version.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah,
I think Gail Carriger is kind of about one of the closer authors for us, probably, Jenny, because like I know like I have some steampunky type stuff, which she has, and I know you do too. So she's kind of adjacent to us, which is cool.
Yeah, and she's like, I don't know. Well, I follow her on social media, and she's fun. She posts fun stuff. So.
Such a good humor writer.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
She's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So next question: when you write, what are your favorite genres to bend and why? So let's go to Bree first.
Well, if you couldn't tell because of my introduction, I like fairy tale, mythology. It also blends a lot of historical stuff in there because Bronze Age and Iron Age, just technology, history, elements. I love it. Like everything pre-Norman, Celtic, or just pre-Norman. I don't like the Normans. With some horror and romance to a lesser extent, just because it's nice to add that bit of edge, like kind of like Holly Black with her fantasy. It's always got that extra bit of old grim style fairy tale stuff, which also blended a lot of fantastic elements, and they're scary as all get out in their original forms.
Awesome. Well, how about you, Jenny?
So I primarily used to write fantasy, and then it was sci-fi, but then this current series is the first time I actually kind of dove into the Western genre, and I think that one's actually my favorite. Like, I have been having so much fun. And then the more I think about it, like for future series ideas, like everything can spin off the Western genre. Like literally anything works with Westerns. So
Firefly, perfect
I love
example.
Yeah, right, exactly. You can have sci-fi Westerns, you can have fantasy Westerns, you can have like supernatural Westerns, which I guess, the weird Western umbrella is large, but that just goes to show you can put Western in anything. So like,
so what you're saying here is we're going to make Westerns the next cozy mystery, where we're going to have all these delightful little subgenres. I could go for that.
Exactly. That's what I feel like. Like literally whatever you can think of, just put in some Western tropes and it will be just beautiful.
The Louis L'Amours with the twist come back.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, Ark, how about you?
What don't I like to put in there? Well, as you know, I blend a lot of fantasy and some science fiction into my latest series. But like Bree, I actually have a fascination with mythology, and I poured a whole lot of world mythology. In fact, one of my main characters is Finn McCool. So,
yeah. I understand that reference.
And everybody's like, McCool? Why'd you come up with such a funny name? I'm like, no, you don't understand. You're all going to understand who Finn McCool is after this. I really love putting mythology into everything I can. It's something I've been obsessing over since I was a kid. And like even sometimes I use it very subtly, like I just use the research from it to inform fantasy. But yeah, I tend to just want to put fantasy in anything because magic. So
magic. I hear that. We need more magic in our lives. Well, for me, so when I started bending genres, I didn't actually realize I was bending genres. I was just like, and I think that probably happened with some of y'all too. I was just like, oh, well, like with Breaker, I started to write it, and I was like, oh, this is boring because it reads like every other fantasy, but what if I set it in the Old West? And I just took off from there, and I haven't looked back. And later I was like, oh yeah, I put stuff together that normally doesn't go together. I put the banana and the peanut butter together, but hey, it worked out.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Well, next one kind of is along the same vein. So what factors, if any, go into your decision to genre bend? Or like, are you just like me and you're just like, oh, I don't even realize I'm doing it? Let's go to Jenny first.
Yeah, actually, so my story is a lot like yours. But originally I started out to write a historical Western. And then I wrote the first chapter. Well, it was supposed to be the short story prequel, but it ended up being the first chapter. But so I'm writing that out, and the main character gets like shot in his thigh. And I'm like, so I go to do my medical research. La 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 la. I'm like, ooh. Like, okay, if you get shot in the thigh, then it's probably going to break your femur. If you break your femur, that's like a huge deal. It's not a good bone to break. So I was looking up like all these surgeries for how to like fix a broken femur. I'm like, I don't think they can do this in the mid 1800s. So then I'm talking with like an EMT friend, and I'm like, how can I get this guy out of this? Because, you know, I'm not going to obviously change anything. So it's happened. Now I just have to figure out how to fix it, right? So, yeah, he's like, well, you know, they could just amputate the leg. And I'm like, but then I have a guy with only one leg, and he's in the Old West, and he's supposed to be this outlaw, and what's he supposed to do on one leg? Like, you could have a fake leg or whatever. And he's like, well, just give him a robot leg. And I was like, I can't do that. It's a historical Western. I was like, wait a minute. So I was like, actually, that would be even cooler. And then from the robot leg, this whole like world building just exploded. And to explain the robot leg, I made a whole world lore. So then that ended up being so fun that I'm like, oh, it's going to be like a weird Western, sci-fi Western now. So it was not my intention at all to genre blend. It just kind of happened by accident, but I'm so glad that happened because it's way cooler now. It's way more exciting. I get to bring in like all the other things I love, which I love like archaeological thrillers. So I get to bring in like these old artifacts that people don't understand. Some of these artifacts have like, you know, they do things that people don't understand. And then I get to explain why that is. And yeah, it's so much fun.
And I kind of love that like a medical professional was the one who was like robot leg. Like that.
I know, right? Yeah, like totally not even remotely going like the realistic way at all. I think he knew. He was like, no, this is just, you know, just give him a robot leg. It's easier that way. But yeah, I'm glad I went with it because yeah, it's much more fun now.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That is true.
All right. Well, Bree, how about you? What factors, if any, went into your decision to genre bend?
Well, I get bored easy, and I like reading conventional fantasy as much as the next person, usually within the YA genre. But it needs to write it, I need something that's twisty or something that is informed by something else. And I don't know. It's just more fun to put stuff together and add my own twist on it. Like with the mythology books, the Exiles of Iris series, it was really fun taking a myth I loved, my favorite myth, the Wooing of Etain, or 18, bleh, I cannot pronounce my own words. And what if this happened? And what if the modern world came into it? And what if this happened? And just there was these branches, and just meshing things that are not alike creates all kinds of new possibilities that are just more fun than if it had stayed by itself.
Don't you just love that, like, with genre bending, you can kind of like with the robot leg thing, you could be like, oh, this thing has happened. How do I address this? And you're like, obviously, let me just do something totally wacky and, you know,
Right.
bring in Finn McCool or a robot leg or something like that.
Exactly. Magic. But now you need to make sure it's not God mode magic or hand wavy. So you need to balance it with, so what's this bad thing that happens? And it's like going off on all these different rabbit trails of causes and consequences.
Mhm.
All right. Well, Ark, what about you? What factors go into your decision to genre bend?
Well, I'm a plotter. But I'm a bad plotter. Like, I really love plotting, but I sometimes sneak off and do things that a plotter shouldn't do. So for me, I write a lot of writing prompts, which you may have seen. And sometimes they just, you get a couple of things and they don't seem to have anything to do with each other, but that always seems to spark the best stuff from me. Because it's like a puzzle. How can I make these two things work together? And a lot of my writing is inspired by these little writing prompts that just went like crazy in my overactive imagination. So I think my imagination is mostly what happens to it, but also trying to find the words for this. I think when it comes to magic systems, because again, I write fantasy because I love magic. When it comes to magic systems, I think too hard about why the magic works the way it does. Mm-hmm. And nobody will know just how hard I think about it, because I don't put all of that in the book, but I did spend like a solid month or two creating a magic system for my last book. And the more I try to explain the magic, the more it doesn't sound like fantasy anymore. So with this last book, there's the magic that comes inherently to some people because they have a gland in their head called the magiothalamus. And it's near your thalamus, but but if you don't have that, it's okay, because there's all these different technologies you can use to use magic. So if it's almost treated like if they were neurodivergent or something like that, like, it's okay, we've got your back. So so that's how I wind up getting things, because my overactive imagination takes me there and I think too much about things.
This sounds more meaty than Dungeons and Dragons.
It's a dragon.
And now that I think about it, I'm also kind of like Brie with my writing, because whenever I write, I try to write things that like won't bore me. So I think that's why I end up doing some of the weird stuff I do too, because I'm like, oh, like I like reading about like Arthurian stuff and knights and castles and dragons and stuff, but it's like I want to write something different and crazy. So then I go off and do my own weird thing. See, I think boredom is part of it too for me too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I know I have a lot of things happen to my main character in my current series, and some readers are like, you must hate this guy. And I'm like, well, no. I'm like, he's still alive, which means I don't hate him. But also, sometimes I'm just bored. Like, something needs to happen now. So
your job
is to never know how much we love our brain babies.
Your job is to throw rocks at them, drive them up the tree, and if they don't figure a way out of it, you keep throwing rocks at them until they do.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It's like, it's been too long since something happened. Something's going to happen now. Got to keep it exciting.
I just keep thinking of the whole mantra, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So like our main characters are going to be like God level, because we just keep ruining their lives.
Exactly.
Amputated their legs and giving them robot legs, that type of thing.
Exactly.
Well, another thing that's cool, something I like playing with, is also underdog characters who either they don't have special powers, their special power amounts to gardening, or, not the fancy, like, look at me, I can make all these poison plants gardening, but I just like pretty flowers gardening. Or, it's that underdog approach where you flip the trope on its head, and subverting that is sublime and create some of the best.
It's like my favorite thing. When authors do that, I'm like, yes, that is the book I want to read. I love it.
I love that too, and I kind of did that with my main character Blaze. His magic is literally breaking things, and like
Cool.
when I came up with it, I was like, how can I make this actually useful? And it did become useful.
So
I
cool.
actually wanted to write about a teenage girl, well, teenage young adult person that didn't have superpowers and wasn't a chosen one, and who figures her way out of this crazy supernatural situation anyways, just using the power of friendship and wit and, you know, human stuff.
I know it gets a lot of flack, but I actually really love the chosen one trope.
It's good if used correctly.
I will watch the movies, I will read the books, but at the last trilogy, the last series I wrote, there was a character, and Amy's going to know exactly who I'm talking about, who played like the mentor. And she was my favorite character. So it really hurt to say goodbye to these characters, but especially her. And so when I started this book, I was like, well, it's about a magic school. There's gonna be a chosen one. But I'd really like to focus on the people mentoring the chosen one so that I can spend more time with the people I actually really enjoy. So yes, there's a chosen one in my book, and she is frequently the point of view. She's just in the minority of the points of view. So yeah, I what you're saying. I think inverting a trope kind of counts as genre blending itself. Blending.
Definitely. All right. Well, what's your favorite thing about writing a genre-bending book or series? And we'll let Ark start us off with that.
Okay. My favorite thing. Just the freedom. The freedom. I like knowing that I'm not limited at all. I'm a plotter, but sometimes you get to a point where you're like, this idea I had is just not going to work. It's not going to work. But when you're genre bending, you can go, hey, you know what would work? This thing that I didn't even think of before. And you can get away with it because you have not confined yourself to a label. So for instance, with Heroes and Harbingers, my book that's coming out next month, they do some portal hopping. And I love portals. But, you know, one of my characters gets injured, and it's not an injury that you can easily recover from. I know because it's happened to me, and it is extremely painful. But I really wanted the plot to keep moving and for her not to be hampered by this injury too long. So what did I do? They went back in time. Not back in time, but, you know, they went to a different reality where these people that don't exist in our reality anymore, they, unfortunately, it was genocide for them. God, it's so sad because they're amazing people. The Native Americans that used to live in my area. But I was like, what if they had survived? You know, what if they weren't the ones that got smallpox, but the Europeans that came in did, and they never came back? What if that happened? And then I was thinking, well, what if they had just amazing, like, medical advancements that we never knew, blah, 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 blah. And next thing I know, well, she was healed because the doctors here are just so much more advanced. Solved. So yeah,
I forgot you did the portal fantasy part of that too. So yeah, you have a lot of genre bending in that book.
Yeah, I do. I
It's
really
been a while since I read your beta copy.
In fact, the sequel that I'm working on right now is called Portals and Pantheons. So there's going to be more portals.
I love it.
All right, Jenny, what's your favorite thing about writing a genre bending book or series?
The exact same thing. Yeah. That literally, like, anything is possible, essentially. So I super love it though, because I used to be a really hardcore plotter. Then I kind of went to a more casual plotter, and now I just wing it. So, but it's really cool with the series, because with pantsing, like, I just stuff comes up, and then you have to be like, okay, well, now what is the story of this thing that just happened? Like, now I have to create the whole backstory history of whatever I just threw in there, which then of course spins off all these other things and then solves other problems that I didn't even know I had yet. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. And like all the little pieces fall into place, and you're like, oh, look, it looks like it did that on purpose, but I totally didn't. So yeah, and I just love it, because when you blend the genres, or even if you just take a trope and kind of turn it on its head, it just opens up so many more possibilities and like fun things to do. I mean, you can just have, it's just like pure fun, essentially. It's pure freedom and pure fun. So yeah, I absolutely love it. And yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think, I don't think I've ever written a like pure genre book. I think that I've always had elements of a few different ones together in my stories. And I think it's because the one genre thing feels too restrictive. Like, but I want to do this. Just let me do this. So yeah, that's my favorite thing too.
Awesome. Well, Bree, how about you?
Well, absolute freedom kind of makes me shut down. That's how my brain works. So I like having something that's familiar. I like having that framework there to fall back on. But, of course, I like twisting it to suit my own, preferences, my own needs. That's why, honestly, I like drawing from the mythology so much, is because, you have those themes, those archetypes and everything. And fantasy is such a broad genre that it's got a lot of different subgenres and everything. So to me, at least growing up, it never felt like mashing so much as just exploring this broad, big space. And so I like having that framework to fall back on, but you still can do stuff that weaves in and out and the same but different. That's really what I enjoy about that potential.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of with you on that, Brie, because like one of the things I really like is taking like standard concepts. Like when people ask me what I write, I'm like, well, I write epic fantasy, but it's got Western elements and it's got steampunk and it's got LGBTQ plus representation in it. And then they're just like, can you like pick a lane? And I'm like, no, I have to add all these cool twists into it, because otherwise it's just boring. Like, I love epic fantasy, I love urban fantasy, but I don't want to just write them by themselves. I love adding the twists to it, which means that when we're actually writing, we can add like lots of fun, unexpected twists as well too, which is makes it more entertaining for us as well when we're writing.
And
I definitely love little twists.
Yeah, and I love how there are more than just us doing this, even if they're, they think they're stay in their lane people, they do something that's slightly different. And then suddenly, urban fantasy is born. But, urban fantasy has so many little things, and, it's the fun evolution of genre and story and subgenre. And really, like originally they were saying, the freedom of it is great because it does make these new ideas and it expands the universe as a whole.
That's true.
Yeah, that makes me think. So I was perusing some Kickstarter projects over the weekend, and I saw one by Sherilyn Kenyon. So I was like, oh, a traditional author's here. Like, what's she doing on Kickstarter? So I looked, and I was like watching her video, because I'm also doing homework while I'm doing this. So I was watching her video, and like she was mentioning how, and I didn't even think about this, but I was like, oh yeah, she was talking about like when she was first started writing, like books like her Dark Hunters they weren't a genre, like they weren't a thing. So, like the publishers were having a hard time selling them, and then they caught on. But I was like, oh yeah, like so other like traditional authors have dealt with the same thing that we're kind of dealing with too. So I thought that was really cool. And she was talking about how like she kind of, couldn't write normal stuff too. She had to write this weird stuff because she enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, that's like really awesome. It was fun to listen to that. And so yeah, people have been doing it for ages, which is really cool. And of course, Stephen King, he's always like blending weird stuff together.
Well, you look even older than that, like Mark Twain, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, Dickens, A Christmas Carol, like all of these are mashups from their time periods.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so for the next one, I think we're going to know some people's answer to this already. But we'll ask it anyway, just to see if anyone has a different answer. Do you think it's harder or easier to write a genre-bending book instead of a book that fits neatly into one genre, or pretty much like writing to market, that type of thing? So let's go back to Bree first.
Well, yeah, mine is very much, it depends on the person, like we were just talking about. Some people, they feel too restricted by the formula and they need the freedom to get outside of it for their creativity to start bubbling up. Some people need some kind of framework to work with, but they need to keep it interesting by switching it up and turning stuff on its head. So yeah, I like having that framework to fall back on if I get too lost, because, I still have that core, I am a fantasy diehard from the get-go. Like, first novel I ever read was The Last Unicorn when I was little. Like, I had it read to me as a bedtime story. And from there, it just influenced me. I read Juliet Marillier, which is historical fantasy, technically, so that's another mashup. And that got me into the Irish mythology. And after that, it just, and all the TV shows that are so influential, Supernatural and Buffy, Vampire Slayer, and, everything else out there is just, it's very much something where everyone's twisting all these things, but they're setting all these patterns. And I feel like even if something seems pure, it's gonna veer into its own flavor because not everybody's going to write the same story. It may seem like they're writing the same story. It may seem there's a lot of copycats, but there's always going to be a different flavor depending on who's writing it.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to ping pong back to myself before I go to Ark or Ginny to answer this question, because what I'm going to say, I think they'll probably agree with, because I know some of what they write and their issues too. So for me, and I guess I'm also I should have added it to the question, but like beyond writing, like the getting your book out into the world too. So like for me, some parts of it can be harder with the writing part, because when you're cobbling together like multiple genres, you don't want to like turn off some of your readers. Because like I had a reader like call Breaker that it was too woke, I guess because I had LGBTQ plus people in it. Oh well. So that can be challenging, kind of trying to blend the things together without turning off too many people. But like what really makes it harder to not fit into one genre is the marketing part, kind of like I talked about in the slideshow, because it's like everyone else is like, oh, I write reverse harem, like these other 500 million books, and like I can target, all these people. And like we're all like, oh, we write this thing that's very unique, and I've got to do like lots of research to find anything even slightly related to that. So that's why I kind of think it's some parts are easy, and then part of it's a lot harder. Like you have to do a lot more work just to get eyeballs on your weird book.
Yeah, even if it falls quote unquote neatly under one thing, like Fae Fantasy. Well, it's not all that steamy stuff. It's not Sarah J. Maas. It's not quite Holly Black. It's not quite all these other things. And it's, that categorizing is difficult.
Yeah. When you go for turning things around like that, then all of a sudden you're like,
yeah, they want this, but do they want this?
Right. It's like, well, I want it, but I don't know about everyone else. So yeah, I do feel like it's definitely harder in the marketing department and in trying to figure out how to explain your book or describe your book, or find things to say, oh, it's like this. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge.
I get mistaken for a YA writer quite a bit. Um, people just see me and go, that's a YA writer.
I think that happens to female authors, fantasy authors across the board.
Especially with cool hair.
Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah, although I need to redye it. But anyway, yeah, I get for a YA author quite a bit. I'm an adult writer, but I'm not spicy. And I'm not like depressing. I like to write books that are for an adult audience. I like to write books that adults can relate with. Doesn't necessarily mean I need like a ton of violence or sex or whatever. It just, that's the audience I want to write to, but it is extremely hard to market. And here I've done a book about a magic school that is like, it's a public school. In this book, everybody knows about magic. It is no big deal at all. Everybody knows that the gods exist. We've always known. And the Chosen One thing is just a really elite internship, basically. So, and it's hard to explain that to people because when I go, I wrote a book, it's called Heroes and Harbingers. It's about a magic school. People go, oh, like Harry Potter? I'm like, please don't give this to your children.
You made My Hero Academia with magic.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Good one.
But yeah, so I did research and I was trying to find keywords. And everybody's like, do academia. And I'm like, I put in academia and I see My Hero Academia. And I also see a whole bunch of books that are the same thing. YA, there's a girl on the cover, she has flames in her hands, and there's like, she's wearing, you know, a plaid skirt and whatnot. Like, this is not at all the book I wrote.
And a crop top.
Yeah. And I'm like, how am I going to get this in the right readers? Because I know this has an audience. How many of us grew up reading books like Harry Potter, Percy Jackson? Now we're adults. We still love those kinds of books, but maybe we want characters we can relate to more. That is who I'm writing for. But it's hard to get past all the stuff that has already been there, and it's got 5 million different like authors doing it. So I decided to make my own subgenre. I tweeted about it, and apparently there's a lot of other authors who write this. They're like, we've been trying to get our book seen. I'm like, we need to band together. So while it's hard, I think that, you know, it's authors that are doing something different that maybe win in the end.
Mm-hmm. But that's the way to do it, though, is to band together, because a few years ago, you know, romantic fantasy wasn't a thing. And I started a Facebook group like, okay, seriously, there has to be other authors writing this. And sure enough, and it ended up being like over 300 authors by the end. And now they have Romantic Fantasy Shelf and a group for romantic fantasy authors and like all kinds of stuff. And it's actually a subgenre on Amazon now. But a couple of years ago, it was not. And I would even type romantic fantasy in the search, and it was a nightmare trying to find anything. So if you can just get enough people going.
I keep doing like hashtag Western fantasy on my TikTok. So like, even like I'm trying to make it a thing. We're gonna make it a thing.
I know, right? Yeah, there is a science fiction Western or Western science fiction or something on Amazon, but of course the genre pollution is horrible. Almost no books in that category on Amazon are actually sci-fi Westerns. So
I don't trust the categories on a lot of sites anymore just because of the cross pollution.
It's
and
horrible. It's almost pointless, honestly.
Well, I'm in Western sci-fi on Amazon because I do have some like sci-fi elements in mine, and like I'm so mad that John Stone is always like the number one. Always.
Exactly. I'm like,
it's a Western.
It is not remotely sci-fi, and his books are just all over that category. It upsets me so much.
Every time I see his books in the Western section at the library, like I'm giving them like a glare. It's like,
Yes.
here, not in my category. You're not in my fantasy sci-fi category around the corner from here.
Yeah.
So you don't belong.
I know. Yeah. Me too. I also glare at his books when I see them.
And Taylor is asking if Princess Bride would be a romantic fantasy, but it is, but it also blends other things like comedy. What do y'all think?
Oh yeah.
I would count that a romantic fantasy. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
The litmus test I've always heard is, does the story stand alone without the romance?
No.
So, like, how big of a role does Buttercup and Wesley play together in their whole story? So,
yeah,
it probably pushes it, but because it does have so many non-romantically inclined side characters, but, you know, it's definitely at least a major subplot.
I would say it's a major. I would say it's enough to probably put it in the romantic fantasy category.
I would.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
I think it's because I'm sorry. I would be because when I grew up, I wanted to marry Wesley. So, yeah.
I like it. I love that.
And I'm going to give my fellow non-spicy writers a little bit of hope, because I know in social media so much on like TikTok and everything, like everything is like spicy, 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 to the point where I made a group about like non-spicy fantasy authors so we could band together. So like the nice thing in the library, like online is kind of like an echo chamber where everybody wants like the spicy hot stuff. But like at the library, like you'll have people come in and you're like, you know, they're wanting book recommendations. You show them Akotar and they're like, oh, you know, like, you know, what's it about? Or like, if you mention that it's like, you know, really spicy, or there's like, you know, like love scenes in it, and they're like, no, I don't want that. You know, what else do you have? So there are still lots of people out there who want it. There's of course still the romance readers who will want them, but then there is still a market for people without spice.
Yeah, like kind of jumping off that, I know people have mentioned that they're not in the YA portion. I am firmly in the YA portion with one of my series, and I like that audience and everything, and that's the big thing I've been running into with marketing, is because of you know, A Court of Thorns and Roses, S.J. Moss, and also it's got the vampire fantasy. She wrote Greek mythology. Jennifer Armentrout. Jennifer, yes, she's another one who I have followed her from the beginning. I love her work, both of them. I respect their hustle and their fan base. And the spice writers know how to, you know, blend it well. And I can definitely respect that they can devastate you as well as turn you on. It's just not something that I'm really into. And I know a lot of people who maybe identify as asexual, or they're just not interested in seeing that with teenagers, or, you know, that kind of thing. And the audience is out there. It's just difficult to find on the social medias.
Yeah. I actually had an ARC reader reach out to me about Heroes and Harbingers. I feel like I've been saying that a lot. And she's ace, and she just said, you know, I really wanted to thank you, because I do have quite a bit of genderqueer rep in this book, and there's a very strong romantic subplot, but I don't, as much as I actually enjoy reading spice sometimes, I just don't enjoy writing it. It's not my thing. And she said, you know, I really appreciated that you could have a romance that was interesting, that I was invested in, and it never needed to be more than that chemistry. Yeah, you can assume maybe these people had sex at some point, but I don't have to be in this moment and feel uncomfortable like I'm, you know, watching something I shouldn't.
Yeah. Jumping off that, like I it's hard to see a lot of that stuff normalized too, that kind of representation. You know, usually you'll have to have like add that this is an LGBTQ plus book or something like that. And I'd love to just see it normalized where if somebody sees that, then like I don't openly broadcast that my books have a ton of bisexual characters. I like writing fae, and most of them seem pansexual. Honestly, that's in my head canon, but you know, that's part of why. But you know, it's also something that, like, I know Zoraida Cordova, her Brooklyn Brujas series has a bisexual romance in it, and it's just like, what? Like, and it wasn't broadcast for this. I had to search to find that when I was looking at the summary. So, you know, more of that genre bending by just adding and normalizing some of these, you know, not as mainstream elements is something that I appreciate about genre bending too.
Yeah, I have to constantly be told by my friends, you know, that you're also writing LGBTQ fiction. And I'm like, I just knew who my characters were.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't going to try to force them to be something else. Like, I know this one's bi. I know this one's a lesbian. I also know that this one's straight. That's just who they are. Why would I change it? Like, you could get me going all day, but like, I definitely want there to be more books with characters that are just as diverse as people in real life. I don't think that has to be the point of the books, though, because, you know, like a friend of mine said he used to have a really bad drinking problem because the only events he could find where he could hang out with other gay men were in a bar. And that started young, like below drinking age. So I want it normalized to the point where it does not have to be your defining character. It's just something about you.
And I will say, I love how you handled it in your book, because like when some of the information comes out about some of the certain characters' orientations, like it was just totally natural. And I was like, okay, awesome. Like, let's move on with the plot now that we know this. So good job. All right, well, I have one more question I want us to try to squeeze in before we have to end for the day, because I'm really curious about this one. So do you have any fun genre bending ideas that you're working or thinking about exploring in the future? So first, let's go to Bree. It looks like she's got some.
Well, this, I guess it would be it's a secondary world fantasy world franchise idea, but I like the darkness of the original Grimm fairy tales, particularly one, The Girl with No Hands. It's not as common as like the Cinderellas or anything, but I also like that we're seeing more necromancy and undead stuff popping up in fantasy, and that just makes me think of classic horror like you know, Frankenstein, which I know isn't the actual name of the book. I think it's Modern Prometheus or something. And, you know, Dracula and the Wolfman and just those classic icons meshed. You're already seeing it with Red Riding Hood and, you know, werewolf stuff. But yeah, those crossovers, I was thinking more of that for my next big project apart from what I'm already writing.
That sounds fun. Well, Jenny, how about you?
Yeah, I have two. I had mentioned them before. I don't actually usually plan this far ahead as far as what to write next, but I'm on the fourth book of my current series, and there's going to be 6 total. And I already have 2 more series that are pretty planned out, which is, yeah, not usual for me at all, but it's actually kind of exciting because I'm really excited about my next series too, which is nice because I was a little worried that after I got done with this one, I would be sad and have no more ideas, of course, which is nonsense. I mean, I have a notebook full of ideas, but you know, it has to get to a certain level before you feel like you can write it. And I was like, oh no, what if I'm done with my current series and then like nothing else is ready? But yeah, that's not happening. So Yeah, I have one series which is a romantic fantasy, which is kind of funny because years and years ago when I started the romantic fantasy group, that was the series I was supposed to be writing then. So I had I wrote the entire first draft, was almost 200,000 words. And then I was like, this is not what I want. So I essentially trashed the whole thing and went and did other books for like 5 years or however long it's been now. So I finally have that series figured out now. I'm so excited. But it will be a romantic epic fantasy series. And I've decided to, you guys probably know this, but the woman falling in love with a guy dragon shifter is like, I don't know, all the rage or something. I just see it like all over the place. So since I see it all over the place, I think, well, I'm tired of that thing. So what if we do something different? So in my series, the lady is going to be the dragon shifter. So
That sounds
yeah,
fun.
I thought that would be fun. Yeah. And so, of course, then there's a whole lore as to the dragon shifters, and that exploded. So I'm taking sort of like I saved a few of the ideas from my original version of this, and I'm putting them into this new version. Yeah, I kept my broody male main character because I love him. I tweaked the main girl character a little bit, but anyway, yeah, so I'm really excited about. And then the next one, the other series, I'm also very excited about, and it will be like it'll sort of be like an American Gods kind of thing, which I'm really trying to figure out. I feel like from the show anyway, like I said, I still want to go back and read the book to see if I can follow the show better, because yeah, like I said, the show confuses me to an extent, but the feel of the show is kind of the same feel I get when I work with this other series. So I like went and looked like, what genre is American Gods? I think they called it a supernatural thriller, I think is what they were. Yeah, it was very strange. Yeah, I'm like, what? It's like the big ones and like Dark Tower series, like they never have good genre labels. It's always like, what? Like nonsense, not helpful at all. So
My opinion, fantasy. It's about fantasy.
right? Yeah, it's something like that. I don't know. It's fantasy of some kind. I don't know what it is, but it has like that kind of feel to it. So anyway, I'm excited about that one too, though. It's going to be kind of dark and creepy, but also really fun. So
I got this at the Friends book sale the other weekend.
oh yeah, hang on, I gotta show you mine.
It even has illustrated pictures in it. I was like, ooh, cool.
Yes. Where's my camera? There it is.
Ooh, nice.
Oh, yeah. See, it's got the illustrations in it.
My husband's collection is in a storage bin back home.
There you go.
Oh,
Yep.
There it goes.
Bodies.
So cool. But anyway, yeah. So if you look up this, like, what genre is this? It's like, I don't know. We need more.
Everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Everything. Yeah. For sure.
All right. Well, Ark, what about you? What are you looking to genre bend in the future?
well, I am actually working on what I'm hoping will be a decent Vela series, because I like to do short stories as well. It takes place in the same universe as Heroes and Harbingers, but it's completely different. It's going to be like a police procedural that involves mythology. So there's that. And then out of nowhere, I started writing a book that is completely not like anything else I've written. First of all, it's YA. It's first person present, which is not my thing at all.
Respect.
I'm a third person, almost omniscient writer, 100%. But it's a YA fairy dystopian heist.
Ooh.
Nice.
It is very fun.
I think you're going to have to write that so Bree can read it, because she's about to come out of her screen to get it.
I feel like Bree and I are about to become best friends.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You find me on
See,
Facebook.
Taylor has us appropriately, so I'm next to Ginny and you're next to Bree, so like we've got the genres together that way.
That's true. That's true. Nice.
Well, that sounds very exciting. I can't wait to read that one too. I'll have to see how I feel about the present tense because that always seems weird. But if it's done well, then it like makes sense.
It's
We'll see.
not my comfort zone, but I kind of feel like Neil Gaiman, I took his masterclass and he was like, when you write
Yes.
something, you do need to figure out right away what,
Mhm.
what tense and point of view and all that, but it needs to be appropriate for the story.
Mhm.
And given that this needs to be one point of view and that it needs to be a dystopian in a world that I want to reveal slowly, I wanted it to be present tense, because if it was past tense, then I would find myself info dumping. So
Interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. That's an interesting take on that. So can't wait to see that. Well, for me, so the genre bending I'm looking at, and this would be down the road because I don't know how long or when I'm going to be able to get to this. But so I had an idea to like kind of mash together like a Moby Dick type steampunk thing with dragons. And then I was like, oh, let me throw some Our Flag Means Death in there. So I have like that idea. And there are like dragon shifters in it too. And it'll take place in my Outlaw Mage world, but in like a different like area. So I've got like that crazy idea. So the first book in that series, I've got like 40,000 words into it, but it's the first draft. And I hate first drafts. I hate them so much. So I have to like get over the first draft hump for that one. But then because like I just love the weird, like the Western and like adding that flavor to things. I read a book, a YA book called The Other Merlin, and it's like a King Arthur retelling, but if like Merlin were a female, and it was really, really good. I can't wait for the second book to come out. And I was like, ooh, this is cool. Also, there's lots of like us rep in it. It's fabulous. I love Lancelot. He was great. And I was like, ooh, what if I did something Arthurian but made it Western? So I was like, that could be a lot of fun. Like, what if instead of like the sword and the stone, it's like the rifle and the I don't know what yet, but something like that.
In the canyon.
Yeah, there you go. In the canyon. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so like I have that, and I was like, ooh, like the Three Musketeers, but Western. So like
I'm
maybe
telling
we'll
you, you can
we'll
add,
make Western
yeah,
interesting.
make anything Western. It makes it so much cooler.
Yeah, exactly. And then I thought about it more like when I was thinking about the Three Musketeers thing, I was like, well, the old classic movie, The Three Amigos, is pretty much the Three Musketeers as a Western comedy.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, that's kind of cool.
I love it. It's such a good
All
movie.
right. Well, it has been so much fun to chat with all of you tonight. And that's all the time we have for today. But I do want to give a big thank you to Ark and Bree and Jenny for joining me today. And I also want to thank everyone who has taken the time to watch this live or for those watching us in the future. I want to thank Amanda, who did comment about the Parasol Protectorate. We love that too. So thanks for shouting out Gail Carriger with us. And also make sure to tune in to us next month when we talk about Writer's Block on June 14th at 6:30 p.m. And don't forget to check out all the other great programs available to you at hcpl.net. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.